In keeping with our series of guest speakers, today I'm welcoming Danny Matamela, who joins us in the front row and will join me on the podium shortly. Danny is a very successful serial entrepreneur who has started and operates a number of very successful companies, one of which is Numa, founded in 2006 and initially built on the premise of being a construction company. However, Numa has diversified and become a far broader offering to market with various pillars to its platform, including property investment, property development, a property consultancy leg, and also architecture. Numa itself directly has investment in property, including student accommodation of about 300 million rand, and indirectly through mentorship programs and investment has helped build a portfolio of in excess of R1 billion. Other than Dandy's accomplishments, as I've already mentioned, he also currently sits as a board member of the Ingonyama Trust. The Ingonyama Trust owns about 30% of all of the land in KwaZulu-Natal, almost 2.8 million hectares, 28,000 square kilometers of land in the KZN region. So to have Dandy on the board, they clearly entrust him with that valuable asset. Dandy today is going to share with us some of his insights and experiences in property development, acquisition in the student accommodation space, and specifically repurposing of buildings or acquiring or acquisition of going concerns rather than greenfields development. Dandy is an accomplished speaker. He's spoken at a number of events. For example, the 4th annual Student Housing Summit, and we invite him today as our guest to talk about student accommodation. So without further ado, Dandy, I'd like to invite you up to the podium, and we look forward to the benefits of all of your experience in this space. Thank you, Dandy.
Thank you, Greg, for inviting me. It's really an honor. Perhaps allow me to start just by thanking categorically the following people. Greg and his team for making time and creating this opportunity for all of us to have a conversation. Please help me appreciate them with a thundering applause. The second person I would really like to appreciate is yourself. You could have been anywhere else, but you chose to be here. One of my favorite Professor William Glazer, come and say in his choice theory, he says you cannot separate choice from habit. So here you are, whether you chose or you behaved yourself here, give yourself a thundering applause for that. Who knows, you might just come back with one of these buildings. Hopefully you brought all your checkbooks. Thirdly, allow me to just appreciate my company, the guys who helped me look nice here, including my wife in absentia. If you don't like how I look, you can't blame it to her. But if for any reason you like really how I look, please pass the compliments, I'll keep them. But also our CEO is here, Mr. Moses Ramabrana. So these are the guys who give me an opportunity to go and sit, whether in boards or have these conversations, whilst they keep the ball rolling in the business. So help me appreciate my team, please. Last but not least, help me appreciate God. A wise man once said that a fool says there is no God. And I thought to myself, thank God I'm not a fool. Someone bigger than you and I wanted us to be here, and give God a big round of applause for that. Thank you. So, when I was preparing for this presentation, of course, now we talk about artificial intelligence. So I asked AI, and I said, AI, what do you think about the South African student accommodation market? And believe you me, we ended up fighting at the end, particularly when I learned that AI doesn't even know my name. I actually asked AI, do you know who I am? Right at the end. And I believe it's a lady. She said, no, I don't know who you are. And I said, but how come everything you're telling me, it sounds familiar? Have you been copying me? have you been reading some of the things that we've been saying? And he said, no, actually, I just gather information from everywhere else. And I said, give me some stats. Now, the difficult part was AI says to me, no, I don't do stats. For stats, you're going to need to go and read all the different resources that are available and all of that. And I'm like, wow. So now I had to come and put all of the many different stats, which I thought I was going to sound clever just by giving you what AI said. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matamela. In case, as I said, I thought I was famous until I found out AI doesn't know me, so I need to take the liberty of introducing myself, particularly when that AI is on my phone. The South African student accommodation market. I have literally, and maybe as well, if I can just mention these, the idea here is really just to have a conversation. I'm hoping that you can ask questions after this short presentation. We come from a background of social housing when we started as a fully fledged company. Social housing background and affordable rental housing, but we made a move towards student accommodation. And one of the conversations that I keep on getting into is, why did you do that? Particularly from the banking side and all of that. Why did we do that? And when we were having that conversation with Craig, I said, listen, I'm hoping that I can bring some insight on the real value and the real reasons why we move towards student accommodation. On the one hand, there is the demand side. Even if you just go now and say, ask AI and say, how is the student accommodation working? They will give you a nice paragraphs of really a growing market that is attractive, that is performing way much better. And one of the reasons for that is because the government has also recognized student accommodation as an equalizer. It's something that creates a buffer, an equalizer for those who have and those who don't have. You can imagine students coming from rural areas, when they come and staying in the same place with people who might be coming from the suburbs and all of that, they're staying in the same place. You don't really have that kind of differentials that you would actually have had in the past. So those are some of the values that you would find makes the student accommodation a really an asset class that is contributing to the broader spheres of things. So let's start with just the demand side, for instance, and I'll also talk about the socio-economic contributions to the investment, to the whole country as such. And our journey as MUMA, as I said, we started as social housing. What are some of the challenges and opportunities that that are there in student accommodation? There is no business which doesn't have cons. It's always pros and cons. And is it better to buy or to build an existing student accommodation? So those are some of the conversations I'm hoping I can bring out in summary. Greg, when he started here, he mentioned how, according to the IFC, for instance, there is more than 800, or there will be more than 800,000 student accommodation bed. But according to research we did as MUMA, we appointed a renowned market research company, Demacon, to do a study last year. Firstly, it was broader in the South African context. Then they came back to just where we are, which is mainly Pretoria. And these are some of the stats. As it is now, we have 500,000 beds. And this figure, as it is said, will grow to 780,000 by 2025. Which is what Craig had already alluded to. Universities as it is now, they can only accommodate up to 20% of the enrolled students, which means there is a need outside what the university can do, which is a challenge to every single one of us here to say, listen, what can I do as a developer to assist in this gap? As it is, if you see some of the appalling state of situations at the beginning of the year when students are looking for accommodation, people end up sleeping in the streets and all of that, and in libraries and in halls until they are placed. Now, if we can have more people who can enter into the market, we might just find that we have done a much greater deal in terms of the socio-economic impact to our industry. These are some of the stats that I literally just summarize some of the few things here to say. As it is, from high school every year, you'll have at least 1.9 million people students who are knocking at universities to be admitted year after year. In 2020, at least 2.5 million of those were enrolled in the higher education, for instance. 4.1 students to be enrolled by 4.1 million students will be enrolled by year 2030 in all our universities. Now, in terms of the numbers, NESFA's budget in 2022 was 49 billion, and the student accommodation market, we are looking at well over 155 billion market. So it's really a very growing market, one that has been growing steadily since the Fees Must Fall years, if you still remember the Fees Must Fall, which really brought the whole revolution of student accommodation. In Pretoria alone, which is where our base is, all our buildings mainly are in Pretoria. We've started now diversifying into other areas. In Pretoria alone, there is close to 25,000 student beds demand that there's just not enough of. Some of the conversations that come into play is this a bubble? Is this something that just in no time it probably would have leveled out and there's no more money? What about the sovereignty of the country? Do we have enough money as a country to say we can back it up? So far we know it's linked to the sovereignty of the country. So for as long as the country still is sovereign and we are doing well, then there's hope for this market. One of the contributions that I believe the student accommodation make is towards urbanization. Think of it in this manner. One of the stories that hit our country recently was the story of the little girl in the rural KZN who ended up making it to the Albany billboards. You remember that young lady? There are people who say this thing is going to equalize with AI and all the fourth industrial revolution. People will be studying more and more at home in another 10 years. I'm sure mainly our bankers would usually be taking a note of caution in that regard to say, look, what will happen when every single person has Wi-Fi and they have tablets and all of that? Now, I want you to imagine telling that little girl that I'm gonna give you a tablet and you're gonna go and study in 10 years from now in your own RDP house or where you're sharing with your family members. And that's where you're gonna be studying and you're expected to still compete. So the greatest contribution that student accommodation has to this country is urbanization. It's contributing way much towards urbanization of the small little towns that were almost dead, university towns in different places, and the big towns that we know, your Hartfield, your Cape Town, your Johannesburg. When you go there now, they have nice, beautiful, trendier, investable and bankable buildings that just makes the place look nice. Now, what's also shocking is that when you just think about urbanization, I've just learned, and I thought, I couldn't believe it actually, when I was studying, I realized that actually urbanization has been decreasing at a rate of 1.4% per annum, which means we're not urbanizing fast enough. And because of that, there's always going to be a gap for the government to get to a point where we can even rise above the poverty line as the country. And until we get to a point where we can all together, not just one, I'm saying literally, I'm calling for every single person who believes, and as I'm talking now about the socio-economic impact, this is an opportunity, and the government has put in a lot of money through development funding institutions to fund these activities, but also from private. I know, and I can speak, you will see from how we have grown, we have enjoyed a lot of benefit from the different financiers and all of that. So there is an opportunity, it's bankable. And just to take you through our journey in 2 minutes. When we started, I won't talk about 2006. When we started, we had we did a greenfield building, which was 22 million rands. We converted to student accommodation, tripled the asset base and it became a 65 million rands. That was just simple conversion. We did the same thing with our other building, which we actually bought at an auction like this. At an auction like this, 212 units we converted to 508 beds, doubling our asset base as well. So that's something beautiful, that's something tangible, it's real, we are doing it, and I believe we can also do it. I can talk about all the other different buildings that we have, but it has always been about that to say, buy something that you know, whether it's a rental apartment that you can convert to student accommodation, increase the yield, and that's how you really make this thing to work. This is just showing our journey since 2006. We went through a rough patch in 2008. We rose again in 2012, and we started again with student accommodation, with normal rentals. And in 2018, we started converting some of our student accommodation. They can see the growth rate between 2018 and 2023. And this year, we are still aiming to hit R1 billion. And I'm hoping that someone here would be able to say, listen, I've got an idea of how we're going to do that. Because quite frankly, it's a dream that we still believe needs to happen. And it must happen without all the answers. And we are excited about that journey. This is an underlying conversation that, as a developer, one would need to think about at any time. On the one hand, we started doing mainly greenfields, and when COVID hit, we decided that no, we don't want to do greenfields development anymore. Greenfields represents like an empty stance, and we started just buying existing buildings, existing student accommodation. And I understand there are some that are really nice existing student accommodation that are already a going concern. If you ask me, it's much better to buy an existing one in this time because there's a lot more of those in the market that are oversupplied. So this is the right time to just buy an existing one, mainly because of the lag that happens when you are literally starting a greenfield and you have to wait for another 12 months to start enjoying your building. Ladies and gentlemen, that will be it from me. I thank you.